It was late September when I found myself flying across the world to a country that can only be described as a true hidden gem. A place where castles and dragons are the norm and where pristine landscapes appear to be ripped right from a storybook. I was craving an adventure to a destination unknown, at least to me, and Slovenia promised to fit the bill. I'm Ashley, by the way, and I'll be driving for 9 days by myself around the country, exploring some of the must-see spots, while secretly being even more excited to pursue the roads and places less traveled. From breathtaking hikes to futuristic mountain huts, terrifying cable car rides, and medieval fortresses abound, my 1,900-kilometer route was nothing short of extraordinary. Stick around till the end when I'll share how exactly I planned it all, and feel free to visit my description for a downloadable map of this itinerary. Smushed between Italy and Croatia sits the short yet mighty coastline of Slovenia. With the Adriatic Sea at its doorstep, the charming town of Piran practically bursts at the seams, overflowing with Venetian-inspired homes, butting right up to the water's edge. Likened to a life-size open-air museum, this historic hamlet has all the intrigue of its much larger Mediterranean neighbors, with notably less congestion. I seized on the opportunity to explore the narrow streets just as the warming sunlight crept steadily across the peninsula. Life here is clearly rooted in the sea, and it was not atypical to observe friends out for a morning swim or folks dining along the shorefront. My first 2 nights of the trip were spent at Hotel Piran, where my room and balcony perfectly framed the rolling tides. I arrived after dark late last night, and after a delicious stuffed pasta at Rostelin, and the rude awakening that I don't actually like Aperol Spritz, I know, controversial opinion, I woke this morning to these serene views. And like the locals, I grabbed breakfast along the water, indulging in the complimentary buffet hosted by my hotel. Nearby was a small street market, which I'm sure sees busier days, but of the few vendors present today, I was convinced into purchasing homemade salts and seasonings. Just give me an adorable grandpa of a salesman and I am sold. Of the many things there are to love about Piran, I was particularly impressed with the town's initiative to be as car-free as possible. Aside from limited residential traffic, all visitors are asked to park further inland, with a short shuttle service bringing them to and from the main square. The mostly empty roadways beckoned my exploration, and I was happy to abide. Overlooking Piran are the town's old defensive walls, built in various stages between the 7th and 16th centuries. For a small admission fee, you can walk the length of the preserved structure, taking in the best panoramic views of the town below. Based on where I saw the sunrise this morning, I think I'd recommend enjoying a sunset from up here. Also, a word of warning, make sure to not slam your head on any of the surprisingly low tower beams. There was a brief moment where I swore I had cracked my skull, but we're all good, all bones still intact. It was worth it for the beautiful views. With an afternoon free, I chose to drive an hour outside of Piran in search of a subterranean world touting baby dragons and old-time railways. My venture led me right to Postojna Cave. Prominently known as the most biodiverse cave in the world, Postojna Cave is a captivating display of dewy formations and brilliant halls. A 90-minute guided tour takes visitors deep into the cave system, inching ever so closely to its famous stalactites and stalagmites. The railway alone holds the distinct honor of being the first cave railroad in the world, debuting in 1872. Admittedly, the crowd levels were slightly overwhelming at the start, but with time, the tour groups spaced out and we were able to fully take in the sights. I was tacked on to an Italian group, so I was given a handheld audio guide to follow along. Aside from the remarkable geology, which I could spend days nerding out over, notable sites included the bridge constructed by Russian prisoners of war during World War I, and the post office, which happens to be the only cave post office in the world. As for those baby dragons, legend has it that these tiny creatures are offspring from a dragon long ago. Their eyeless, snake-like bodies, jagged heads, and pale skin certainly pull at the imagination, but they are an important part of the cave system and one scientists continue to study to this day. Sadly, I did not find one to take home with me. Back outside, visitors can find shops, restaurants, and a hotel, all themed around the cave. But for me, I was on my way over to an unusual residence, one which finds solace tucked 123 meters up an exposed rock face. Predjama Castle, known to be the only preserved castle in the world situated in a cave, is an 800-year-old marvel that is really a stunning sight to see in person. From the outside, it felt like a children's fairy tale come to life, and the fantasy of it all continued within. My ticket to Postojna Cave also covered my entry here at the castle, so after downloading an app to listen to the self-guided tour, I was on my way inside. What I loved about this location was the ability to get up close to the architecture to see just how intertwined it was with the natural landscape. Imagine rooms leading into the longest cave system in Slovenia. That's what you'll find here, and in no small part to the creativity of builders long ago. Of course, the history here is rather grim, with life in the castle depicted to be cold, dark, damp, and constantly on alert for invasion. The sounding of the bell would alarm residents to a possible battle where they could retreat deep within the cave system through a network of tunnels or gear up for a fight. On display was the medieval weaponry used by knights of the castle. As the afternoon grew late, I had one more stop for the day I was interested to uncover, and that would be the idyllic town of Idrija. Proudly securing the title of a UNESCO World Heritage Site, Idrija is best known for its mercury mine and artisanal heritage of lace making. I was hoping to learn about each of these, but it turns out all tours had wrapped up for the day, so I was on my own to wander the area. The Idrija mercury mine, dating back to 1490, is the second largest in the world behind Spain and was considered to be one of the most technically equipped mines in Europe. During the day, visitors can tour some of the shafts and facilities, but for me, I'll have to rain check that and plan a return trip in the near future. Working up an appetite, I arrived back in Piran for a tasty dinner along the shorefront. Between last night's meal and tonight's meal, I should have suspected I would be in for quite the culinary journey during my time here in Slovenia. By the end of the trip, I could safely say that this country easily delivered the best cuisine of all of my travels. Capping off the evening was a quick stop at the gelato shop as I closed out my second and last night in Piran. Intent on paddleboarding early the next morning, I walked over to the resort area of Portorož to find a rental shop. Along the way, I stumbled upon a quirky little hostel and even ran into a wild hedgehog. By the time I made it to the water sports center, a local guide and I determined it just wasn't the morning to be out on a paddleboard, unless I was after a more turbulent experience. With that, I decided to hit the ground running as I plan to tackle a nearly 6-hour drive clear across one of Slovenia's least visited regions. My first stop, Štanjel. High atop Turnhill sits Štanjel, a medieval village and castle characterized by its unique karst architecture and culture. The moody morning atmosphere was really doing wonders, bringing in just the right vibe for the location. I spent about an hour roaming the complex, taking in the lush path circling the perimeter and making my way deeper into the village itself. I was fascinated by it all, the rolling green landscape that stretched to the horizon in nearly every direction, and the thoughtfully crafted gardens dominating the terraced hillside. But perhaps most striking to me was the fact that this was still a functioning village tucked within the ancient walls. Wandering the slender streets, you'll find hints of modern life sprinkled throughout. And then you might stumble into the shell of an old home. It was a completely immersive experience, making it easy to picture what living here must have looked like long ago. I highly, highly recommend to stop here if you're in the area. At this point, I really had no plan other than to make it to my bed and breakfast by sundown. I wanted to take my time and be fully present as I traversed the country. While the easiest route would have obviously been the expressways, I intentionally stayed on local roads only, and I am so happy I made that decision. There's something to be said about a road trip, the idea that you're both moving through time and through destination. It's a transformative experience. The world kind of unfolds in front of you, letting in just enough to pique your curiosity while disappearing just as quickly in the rear view. Rural Slovenia was the perfect place to indulge in the journey. Over the next 4.5 hours, I'd start to identify common themes like the look of central power stations in small villages or the private wayside shrines adorning the curbs. I'd come across the occasional tractor jam and spend time trying to point out every town church. Apparently, there's over 2,700 scattered around the country. But with the many similarities, there were even more differences, places so unique from the next that I'd find myself pulling over just to explore a bit more. Well into my drive, I came across the dreamy Otočec Castle, Slovenia's only castle situated on a river. Little is actually known about who built this and when, which is pretty unfortunate for that dead architect, but at least they might have some solace in the afterlife knowing how appreciated the fortress is today. For a pretty penny, you can enjoy a luxury stay complete with a Michelin star meal, or for the price of absolutely nothing, you can soak in the park surrounding the castle grounds. As daylight slowly faded away, I found myself endlessly winding through the back roads of Slovenia, eventually emerging on the hilltops of the east. This was such a peaceful area, and though I was merely passing through, I got the sense that this was one of the best displays of authentic Slovenian life today.
So I just got to my little bed and breakfast, spent all day driving across the country, and my host told me to walk to dinner. She said, "Don't drive, no need to drive, just walk into town, locate the castle, and head in that direction." So I have my headlamp on, heading towards the castle, and looking for dinner.
Recommended to me was a restaurant called Amadeus in the town of Ptuj, where I'll be staying overnight. I had a mouth-watering pepper steak and was encouraged to try a traditional Slovene dish, cottage cheese dumplings in mushroom sauce. A hearty ending to a wonderful day. Good morning from the Panorama B&B in Ptuj. I had a lovely night's sleep in my room, which was very simple, comfortable, and clean, and I woke this morning to the intoxicating smell of a homemade and homegrown breakfast being prepared by the owner. I wish I caught their names, but the host and her daughter could not have been more gracious, as they gave me plenty of tips for things to see and do, and also helped me with the pronunciation of many of the Slovene words you're hearing me try to say correctly in this video. Surrounded by countless vineyards and rolling green landscapes, Ptuj is one of many towns situated in Slovenia's iconic wine region. It's a destination steeped in history and promising ultimate relaxation. I had hoped to spend the day hopping between a few vineyards, but the weather kind of threw off the sunny treat-yourself ambiance I was after.
Very rainy out.
So instead, I chose to explore the town center before once again hitting the road. Ptuj is known to be Slovenia's oldest town, with evidence suggesting it has been inhabited since the Stone Age. It's weird to say, but without even knowing that fact as I walked the streets, I could definitely feel the weight of the place and sense the centuries of stories to be shared. Maybe it was in the architecture or perhaps the quiet confidence of its people. Whatever it was, I got the feeling that this was a special place. If you visit during carnival season, which occurs sometime around Easter, you'll be treated to a traditional parade of currents believed to chase away evil forces and welcome in a good spring and a thriving harvest. Not far from Ptuj is Žiče Charterhouse, a solitary Carthusian monastery tucked deep within the valley of St. John. With a varied history spanning nearly 850 years, Žiče has played a significant role in the culture of the area and is best known for its preservation of medieval manuscripts, a robust wine cellar, and the creation of one of Slovenia's oldest pharmacies. The biggest draw for me was how spectacularly photogenic the property was. It was a pleasure to roam around listening to the audio guide as I went through, but admittedly, after about 15 minutes, I felt like I had seen everything there was to see. I wouldn't recommend making a day trip out of this, but if you happen to be in the area, it's worth a quick visit in. Truthfully, I was more captivated by the valley than by the actual monastery and parked my car at a nearby church to take in the scenery. With one more stop on my radar before heading to the Alps, I arrived at the doors of Celje Castle. And to my surprise, I was one of only 3 people visiting the property that hour. The castle is a striking fortress towering rather significantly over the community below. Views from atop the hill are unmatched, and it is easy to understand why the Counts of Celje, Slovenia's most influential dynasty, called this place home. There's plenty to learn here about the castle's colorful past, but I secretly enjoyed simply wandering around, pretending it was my own kingdom. Naturally, I had to check in on my torture chamber to ensure everything was up to snuff. This device, folks were pushed into, and then there are spikes in there that were pushed from the outside in, so it would just puncture your body, but it wouldn't do any harm to your organs. Quickly realizing I was just hanging out in an actual dungeon by myself, I thought it might be best to hit the road in favor of a less spooky adventure. Or so I thought. Now, we'll come back to how exactly I got here, but let's just listen to the wind and imagine how much this cable car must have been swaying, because the footage just doesn't do it justice. At one point, after I panicked and shut off my camera to hold on, we were standing on one side of the car to try to distribute the weight against the gusts. Wow. That was crazy. From here, it was only a 15-minute soaking wet hike up to my accommodations. I am in Velika Planina, a settlement in the northern region of Slovenia. The drive from Celje Castle here was an easy one, as I stayed mostly on the expressway, making one stop in the incredibly beautiful town of Kamnik. I grabbed some groceries and then continued on to the cable car station. I'd be staying in a mountainside hut for the next 2 nights, so everything I thought I might need had to be carried up with me. And when I say hut, it was not as off-grid as you might be imagining. In fact, this hut was probably the most connected accommodation I've ever had the pleasure of staying in. Thanks to sheer luck, I happened to be one of the first people to check it out. With over 210 connected devices, a heated floor, in-unit sauna, and every amenity you could hope for, this is definitely the most comfortable way to enjoy such a remote location. Thank you. It's definitely a little bit chilly today. Let me wipe you off there. Well, it's a very blustery, chilly morning here on the top of a mountain, near the top. I am actually taking the chairlift up to the top from my hut. I've been battling a cold the last couple of days, so I slept in this morning. And I am on my way to hopefully get some soup. And I want to show you this place tomorrow. The photos of it look incredible, but clearly I can't see anything at this moment. But it's supposed to be sunny tomorrow, so I will wake up at sunrise and show you around. Let's see the view. Alright, I was on my way to this hut because it's supposed to have some snacks. And it's closed. I was hoping to stock up for my night tonight in my hut. I don't know what the hours are. It doesn't say. It's definitely locked. Oh wait, I hear music. Oh god, please reopen. Let's try it. Yes. I ordered a stew and strudel, which was exactly the medicine I needed. That and some well-earned rest. Occasionally, I have to remind myself that it is, in fact, okay to do nothing on vacation, and that was precisely my plan for the remainder of the day. Finally, after 2 days in the clouds, the sunrise glow stretched infinitely across the sprawling mountainscape. Velika Planina was officially coming into view. Known as the largest preserved shepherd settlement in Europe, Velika Planina is an enchanting plateau frozen in time. Its 140 huts offer an authentic glimpse into the lives of local herdsmen who can be found tending to their cattle and pastures every summer. In the off-season, you'll be hard-pressed to find much action, but it's still a fascinating place to imagine the busier times. Something about the design of the huts captured my heart. The squatty yet sturdy build with pointy tops was just too cute and unlike anything I had ever seen. I'm sure there was a practical purpose for this style, probably having something to do with the harsh winters. Today, visitors can explore the area on foot, stopping at the museum or popping over to the local dairy shop. I enjoyed both before running into an elderly couple who I think felt a little sorry for me as a solo traveler and insisted on taking my picture several times. They were like my stand-in grandparents. It was a funny little photo shoot, and these are the photos I got from them. Thank you both for this sweet moment. 6 days into my trip, and it was finally time to visit Slovenia's capital city, Ljubljana, or Ljubljana, as I heard at least 2 locals say. Proudly embracing the legend of a dragon long ago, Ljubljana is a fanciful city indulging in colorful buildings, intricate architecture, and abstract art. At times so abstract that you might step right over it. Once part of an important trade route connecting the Black Sea to the Mediterranean, Ljubljana today serves as a main connection point to the rest of the country. In fact, you can reach most places in Slovenia within 1 to 2 hours, making this an ideal city to base your trip. Allowing myself to get lost among the narrow streets, I felt really immersed in the culture of the city. It was relaxed, young, vibrant. It made me question if any of these people actually had jobs to get to, or if partaking in a 3-hour lunch break was just the norm. Eager for a snack, I popped over to this shop offering traditional Slovenian sausage, which was easily the messiest meal I had, but perhaps one of the best. I made sure to pay a visit to the infamous Triple Bridge, stopped by the city market, which was unfortunately not open that day, and took in the views of the castle above. I got the sense that there weren't too many touristy, must-see things to actually do here. It felt like you were just dropping into a city doing its thing, and that was the experience. No fancy tours required. I loved it. With just a few hours left before sunset, I decided to head out in search of Slovenia's most well-known destination, Lake Bled. But first, a quick pit stop along the way. If you're seeking a stay somewhere outside the city center with quintessential Slovenian vibes and a quieter temperament, I'd recommend you consider Škofja Loka. Home to castles, mansions, rivers, and historic bridges, Škofja Loka flies surprisingly under the radar of many visitors, but I'd make a strong case for it. The town had a slight bohemian feel, one suitable for creative types, but more than that, it was an endearing peek into everyday life. There was just enough community surrounded by an overwhelming abundance of nature. A true look at the people's connection to their environment. Arriving to Lake Bled after dark, I'm going to save my tour for the morning and head straight to dinner at the Old Cellar Bled. Consistently rated as one of the top restaurants in Lake Bled, I thoroughly enjoyed my homemade bread and olive oil, a sampling of local cow, sheep, and goat cheeses, as well as Fuji pasta and beef paired with a regional wine. I was going to sleep well tonight, and I had the most comfy room booked upstairs at the Old Bled house. Watching the world come to life along the shorefront of Lake Bled was one of the most surreal moments for me. For months, I had been looking at this picture in my home. It's actually one of several photos my smart TV randomly uses as a screensaver. I knew when I first saw it that I wanted to be standing right there. It was just as photogenic as I had imagined and really breathtaking in scale. In the still of the morning, I was happy to take in the more subtle characteristics of the lake, finding conservation to be a strong theme in the area. There were several signs pointing to the various species that reside here, such as otters and sandpipers, and I even read a sweet tale about tree fairies who lovingly guard the environment. I walked halfway around the lake, soaking it all in before the inevitable throngs of tour buses and traffic arrived. If you are debating a trip to Lake Bled, here are my personal observations and opinions. Yes, this lake is absolutely worth seeing. Come early and leave early. I'd say a half day here or even just a few hours is sufficient. Buses are easy to catch from Ljubljana, and if you have a car, be mindful of limited parking once you arrive. Something that caught me by surprise was the fact that there didn't appear to be a central village as you might expect in a popular destination. For some reason, I imagined an area of back-to-back shops and restaurants, but they were much more spread out and authentic to the natural structure of the community. I actually liked this, but from a visitor perspective, it kind of felt like there wasn't much to do. Hence why I think you only need a couple of hours here. The infamous Bled cream cake will be pushed at you from nearly every angle, and I'm sorry to say that I was still so full from the night before that I had to skip it, but just know this is apparently something you have to try. A little less known are the traditional anise cookies, which I found at a local bakery near my hotel. I grabbed a handful to bring back to share with my family in New York. And with that, I was on the road once again for a fairly short drive to Gosh Martuljak, the gateway to Triglav National Park. If you followed my Switzerland series, you will remember my friend Shirley, who I met up in the Alps. She very casually suggested the Triangle Hotel to me for this trip, but failed to disclose just how picture-perfect this location was. It was actually hard for my brain to fully process the view. The room was surprisingly spacious with lovely decor, and the hotel lobby and restaurant were an elegant yet cozy blend of modern influences and alpine nods. Eager to squeeze in a short hike before dinner, I went on the recommendation of my concierge to visit a nearby waterfall. After the hike, I made a quick stop at Lake Jasna for a tranquil sunset. My evening wrapped with yet another incredible meal, this time at the Michelin star restaurant right in my hotel. I mean, just the butter alone was something to rave about, but the locally sourced wine, beef tartare, and chicken dishes were truly out of this world. And Lord knows this was the fuel I needed for tomorrow's big hike. Securing the title of Slovenia's only national park, Triglav is a spectacular nature preserve spanning the country's Julian Alps. Cutting through the middle is the Vršić Mountain Pass, a 24-kilometer panoramic road comprised of dozens of hairpin turns and plenty of lookouts. If you haven't guessed, this is where I'm starting my morning on the search for a trail. Historically, the path over the Vršić Pass was used to access nearby villages for shopping and to help farmers tend to their pastures. In the early 1900s, it was used as a means to transport timber, and by the First World War, over 10,000 Russian prisoners of war were used to construct the road that we see today, completed in 1917. A chapel built by the prisoners themselves pays tribute to all those who lost their lives during the construction of the roadway. Not too far from the chapel was a trail recommended to me by a few locals. The Slemenowa Špica Trail is a 4.9-kilometer out-and-back route with over 393 meters of elevation gain. It promised to be a pretty steep climb, but with phenomenal views. I'm only halfway through this trail and it is unbelievable, and I have not passed a single person on the way, just a bunch of sheep. What is the telltale sign you are the first person on a hiking trail for the day? Spider webs. And I was unfortunately nominated to clear the path. After the initial uphill grind, there was a lull and incline leading me through the most magical stretch of forest I've ever come across. The early morning light trickling across the mountainside paired with the absolute silence made for one of the most peaceful moments of my life. The only thing better than feeling on top of the world is actually being on top of the world, and that's right where this trail ends. That is Italy over there. That is Austria. I was so fortunate to have 30 minutes here all to myself, relishing in the scenery and snacking on an apple strudel. If anyone ever asks me where my happy place is, this is it. Scared me. Oh, now he's gone. With other hikers and their pups reaching the summit, I took that as my cue to start the trek back down. And I'll have you know, for as strenuous as I found the climb up here to be, I was passed on the way back down by a baby in a backpack and a pregnant lady, so you'll be hearing no complaints from me. After grabbing breakfast, I continued my drive down the Vršić Pass, stopping for the occasional photo, and eventually arriving at the valley floor. Flanked by the vibrant Soča River, the valley is filled to the brim with lush greenery, thundering waterfalls, and quaint homesteads. The star of the show is undoubtedly the river itself, which really is that color. There are plenty of spots to get up close and personal with it, and I jumped out of my car more than once to explore. I'd also like to give a quick mention to the Ljubljana Alpine Botanic Garden. It was off-season and closed when I visited, but it looks like a wonderful place to swing by if you're ever here over the summer. As I worked my way through the valley, I eventually arrived in Bovec, where I'd be staying the night, sadly my last evening of the trip. Making one more stop, I pulled over at Cluj Fort, an important landmark to the defense against Napoleon's army and attacks during World War I. Unfortunately, the site was already closed for the day, so I wasn't able to peek inside, but I was in this area because I heard of another fort I could explore, the abandoned Fort Herman. I saw the signs for it, and I saw the trail, but it was eerily silent here, with just one car nearby and no people to be found. Apparently, the trail leads through a dark tunnel and up to an abandoned fort, but I ended up spooking myself out of doing it. Fortunately, a very kind gentleman on YouTube filmed his experience and is allowing me to share it here. I checked into Hotel Boca, a nice property with a front row seat to the Soča Valley and river. It was clear that this hotel is a great launching point for many adventure activities, and the rooms were well appointed to comfort tired bodies. I was only here for a few minutes before I left in search of a low-key place to eat. This pizza place was closed and apparently guarded, so I continued into the main heart of Bovec itself to find some dinner. This town oozed outdoorsy vibes, with most folks appearing to have just wrapped up some grand adventure out in nature that day. This was a great spot to wind down, and I grabbed the most casual meal I could find at the Thirsty River Brewery. My final morning in Slovenia was a fittingly dreary one. I was so sad to be leaving this beautiful country, but also proud of all that I was able to see during my 9 days on the road. From serene coastlines to spectacular caves, towering castles, and more, this was an adventure of a lifetime, and I'm thrilled to be able to share it with you all. This morning, I have a few stops planned as I slowly make the long drive back to the airport. My first mission of the day was to find cheese, a staple product of this region. A Google search led me to a nearby dairy farm with a cute little storefront, or vending machine rather, and an interactive exhibit. I was clearly the only person visiting the farm, so a very kind employee took me under his wing, offering to show me around. I got to meet the cows who were normally grazing out in the pastures, and even met their babies. The gentleman I was with encouraged me to visit Planica Market on my drive out, which is a grocery store exclusively featuring dairy products from this region. They are proud of their cheese-making heritage here, and it's definitely worth a visit if you want to indulge in the freshest dairy you've ever had. I spent the next hour and a half winding through more of Slovenia's backroads, passing through adorable villages and atmospheric hillsides. The scenery was kicking off, and I came to thoroughly enjoy the moody feel of the day. After about 90 minutes, I arrived at Lake Bohinj, not too far from where I was days ago at Lake Bled. Lake Bohinj is often described as the larger, quieter brother of Bled, and I was curious to compare the two. Unfortunately for me, there wasn't much to see. I waited, and even jumped out of my car for a brief moment when the clouds appeared to lift, but then was swiftly put back in place as the rainfall intensified. It was me and a nearby couple parked on the side of the road, just waiting for any sort of view. But you know what? This moment, despite its drama, was a fitting conclusion to the trip. It was just the teaser I needed to convince me into a return visit when I can uncover more of what Slovenia has to offer. So, what are some things you should know about Slovenia before booking your trip? Slovenia is located in Central Europe, bordered by Italy, Austria, Hungary, and Croatia. If you're flying in, Ljubljana Airport is the largest international airport in the country, located not too far outside the capital city center. Neighboring international airports that you could also consider include Venice and Zagreb. There is a train system here, but I was candidly told by more than one local that it is not reliable and folks should consider the buses instead. For me, obviously I felt renting a car would be the best way to experience the country at my own pace, so I booked my rental with Enterprise right out of Ljubljana airport. If you're driving into the country with your own car, you want to make sure to put the vignette sticker in your window, which is needed to pay the tolls. If you're renting a car, it should already come with that. Now, how exactly did I pick the route? After a few weeks of casually reading up on Slovenia, I started pinning locations that caught my interest to a map. I usually do this directly on Google My Maps or more recently using Travel Mapper, which I made a whole video about. Once I have a healthy amount of places pinned, I start booking hotels in the areas that seem to have the most pinned sites, taking into account how much time I might want to stay in that area, and then I connect the dots from there. The kicker here is that I also look at places without many pins, in this case Eastern Slovenia, and my curiosity often gets the best of me. I don't just want to do the popular stuff, I want to venture into the lesser known regions, which is how I inevitably created this unconventional road trip. If it can help you at all, I'll have a link to my actual map and itinerary, plus dozens of other pin sites in the description of this video. I would love to know if you end up using parts of it for your trip. As always, thank you so much for watching.